Oh, back to school. Back to school. I got my lunch packed up, my boots tied tight. I hope I don't get in a fight.
You know, going back to school has always been a bit of a bummer. Summer's over, your freedom's gone, and suddenly you're staring down textbooks, pop quizzes, and cafeteria mystery meat.
There's very little meat in these gym mats.
But at the same time, those shorter days and cooler nights start to creep in, carrying with them just the right kind of spooky vibe. Because in the world of horror, heading back to class can mean a lot more than boring lectures and detention slips. High schools, college campuses, and dorm hallways become prime hunting grounds for slashers, monsters, and supernatural terror. So with summer break coming to a close, let's crack open the year's darkest syllabus, 15 horror films that prove school spirit can be deadly. Now I've got a bit of a personal connection to this one. My dad rented Scream when I was around 10 years old, and while my sister and cousins were glued to the TV, he decided to spice things up. I had this old Grim Reaper skeleton mask and he put it on and came creeping into the room. I saw him right away, but they didn't. So when he jumped out at the perfect moment, they absolutely lost it. Meanwhile, I was doubled over laughing. Honestly, that prank was scarier than half the slashers I saw at the time. But that kind of sums up Scream. It's not just scary, it's fun. You've got Sidney Prescott trying to navigate classes, friends, and a town still haunted by murder, while Ghostface turns lockers, parties, and study groups into hunting grounds. The film works as both a love letter to horror and a sharp parody of teen life, mixing brutal kills with pop culture savvy dialogue. As a back-to-school horror movie, it's perfect. It taps into that feeling that high school itself can be a horror story. Cliques, rumors, the pressure to fit in, and then just throws a knife-wielding maniac on top of all of it. Scream turned its cast of students into instant horror icons, and Ghostface became a mask as recognizable as Michael Myers or Freddy Krueger. So whether it's your first day back or your senior year send-off, Scream is a reminder that high school can be murder. Literally. If we're talking about school horror, well, it doesn't get much more iconic than Carrie. Brian De Palma's adaptation of Stephen King's debut novel is basically the ultimate cautionary tale about what happens when you push the wrong classmate too far. At its heart, it's a story about high school cruelty. Carrie White is relentlessly tormented by her peers, humiliated in the locker room, and constantly beaten down by her unhinged, religiously fanatical mother at home. School was supposed to be her escape, but instead it becomes another battlefield. What makes Carrie stand out isn't just the bullying, but how painfully real it feels. Almost everyone watching can recall a time they felt awkward, singled out, or left on the outside looking in. Carrie is just the extreme version of that shy, socially awkward kid who finally snaps once she realizes she has powers. And then comes the prom scene, one of the most legendary set pieces in horror history. The build-up, the prank, the slow burn of humiliation, and then Carrie's telekinetic wrath unleashed on her classmates. De Palma shoots it like a nightmare that you just can't wake up from. As a back-to-school horror movie, it nails something that no slasher or creature feature really can: the everyday horror of adolescence itself. Lockers, gym showers, and classrooms become as frightening as any haunted house. It's not just about a girl with powers, it's about the consequences of cruelty and isolation, in a setting that I think we all remember. And decades later, Carrie remains a grim reminder that sometimes the scariest part of school isn't the test or the teachers, it's the other students. I'll be honest, the only reason why I first checked out The Woods was because Bruce Campbell was in it. I'm a big Evil Dead fan, so anytime Bruce Campbell pops up, I'm there. Now, he doesn't exactly chainsaw his way through demons this time around. His role is pretty small, but he does grab an axe out of a shed at one point, and you can't tell me that isn't at least a little nod to The Evil Dead. The movie itself is a slow burn supernatural tale set in an all-girls private school in the 1960s. A troubled young woman is sent away to this isolated academy, where the teachers are a little too strict, the woods surrounding the school feel alive, and strange things start happening at night. It's got that classic boarding school atmosphere, lonely halls, whispered rumors, and the sense that being sent away from your home doesn't mean you've escaped your problems, it just means you've been dropped into new ones. What keeps it engaging is the mood. Director Lucky Marky McKee leans into a gothic fairy tale quality, where the forest itself becomes a looming character. And Patricia Clarkson, who plays the headmistress, is fantastic. While The Woods didn't make a huge splash when it came out, it's a unique entry in the back-to-school horror lineup because it blends the coming-of-age anxieties of boarding school life with supernatural dread. It's not as flashy as some of the slashers on this list, but it's an atmospheric little gem. Plus, bonus, Bruce Campbell with an axe, which is never a bad thing. When it comes to back-to-school horror, sometimes the scariest part isn't the exams or the bullies, it's the kids themselves. Village of the Damned takes that idea and cranks it to 11, giving us one of the creepiest classroom scenarios in horror history. After a bizarre incident where an entire English village falls unconscious, every woman of childbearing age suddenly becomes pregnant. 9 months later, the town is home to a batch of eerily identical children with pale hair, glowing eyes, and minds far sharper and far more dangerous than any normal student. The school setting comes into play as the kids grow older and begin learning together, their hive mind intelligence making them impossible to discipline. Imagine being a teacher facing down a classroom where every child is smarter than you, can read your mind, and has the power to make you do whatever they want. Detention slips don't really cut it when your students can force you to walk into traffic. Eventually, the children barricade themselves inside their schoolhouse, and what started as a small town mystery turns into a terrifying standoff between adults and their inhuman offspring. As a back-to-school horror pick, Village of the Damned works perfectly because it plays on that universal anxiety teachers feel at the start of every new year. What fresh horrors are waiting in the classroom? Only here, the horrors aren't kids glued to their phones or refusing to do homework. They're pint-sized telepathic overlords plotting humanity's downfall. Jennifer's Body is a high school horror that blends teen drama, dark comedy, and supernatural terror in a way that's equal parts entertaining and unsettling. Megan Fox stars as Jennifer, the popular girl whose life takes a deadly turn after a mysterious ritual gone wrong, leaving her possessed and hungry for her classmates. High school here is turned into a literal hunting ground. Cliques, crushes, and rivalries all become life or death matters. One of the fun things about watching Jennifer's Body today is how unmistakably mid to late 2000s it all feels. References to MySpace, the music, the fashion, everything screams 2009, giving it a very specific cultural snapshot of the era. And while you're paying attention to the chaos and carnage, you might also spot a familiar face in a small supporting role. Chris Pratt? I didn't even recognize him at first, and I kept thinking, this guy looks like Chris Pratt, but something feels off. It's a tiny cameo, but it's fun spotting him before he became the Chris Pratt we all know. What really elevates the movie is how it mixes horror with satire. Diablo Cody's sharp, witty script pokes fun at high school cliches while still delivering genuinely tense and shocking moments. Amanda Seyfried's character Needy provides a grounded counterpoint, and the friendship-turned-rivalry dynamic keeps the stakes emotionally engaging. Jennifer's Body isn't just a gore fest, it's a commentary on the high school ecosystem, where popularity can make you untouchable until it literally devours you. And of course, the scariest part of the whole movie, Megan Fox's toe thumbs, obviously. Before Scary Movie came along, there were Student Bodies, a horror spoof that hit theaters in 1981, long before slashers had even reached their peak. Because of how early it came out, the film is less about mocking the entire slasher wave and more about poking fun at the big names that kicked the genre off: Halloween, Friday the 13th, and Black Christmas. What makes Student Bodies stand out is how different it feels from the movies it's making fun of. Unlike most slashers of the time, this one is light on blood, light on violence, and completely devoid of nudity. Strangely enough, despite being as tame as possible, it still earned an R rating. And the funniest part? The movie itself makes a joke why it was rated R, making that gag my favorite joke in the entire movie. There's also a great bit near the beginning that feels way ahead of its time. The killer is choosing which weapon to use on its victim, and instead of going with something dangerous, he settles on a paperclip. It's a pretty absurd gag that kind of feels like it was ripped off in Scary Movie. Is it a coincidence? Maybe. Either way, Student Bodies deserves more credit for laying the groundwork for horror comedy before it was even cool. If you went to high school in the late 90s, there's a good chance your cafeteria wasn't secretly run by aliens. But if it was, congratulations, you basically lived through the faculty. Directed by Robert Rodriguez and written by Kevin Williamson of Scream fame, this movie is essentially Invasion of the Body Snatchers reimagined for the MTV generation. Aliens invade a small town high school, infecting teachers first, then spreading to the students, until only a handful of misfits are left to fight back. It's classic Band of Outsiders versus the world storytelling, with a slick late 90s twist. Complete with alt-rock soundtrack, moody stares, and more slow-motion struts than you can count. The cast is stacked like a yearbook of 90s icons. Elijah Wood as the awkward nerd, Josh Hartnett as the rebellious dealer, Clea Duvall as the goth outsider, Jordana Brewster as the queen bee, and Usher just kind of being there? Add in teachers like Famke Janssen, Robert Patrick, Salma Hayek, and even Jon Stewart, and you've got a who's who of, wait, they were in this? Watching it now feels like opening a time capsule from 1998. Between the soundtrack, the fashion, and the snappy Kevin Williamson dialogue, it practically bleeds late 90s teen horror cool. And then there's my personal awkward experience. I first saw this when I was 12 sitting with my cousin and his then girlfriend, who just so happened to look eerily similar to the main alien girl. So when she suddenly decided to strip down to nothing, I was left squirming in my seat, trying to look anywhere but her or the TV. Nothing like an alien invasion movie giving you actual secondhand trauma. Few movies manage to juggle college comedy, alien parasites, axe-wielding maniacs, and zombies all at once. But Night of the Creeps somehow nails it. The story kicks off with two college losers trying, and failing, to impress women, and the movie totally sells their dynamic. They genuinely feel like best friends and not just two random guys. But then the alien slugs show up and all bets are off. Once they burrow into people's brains, they turn their hosts into walking corpses. And suddenly this goofy college comedy becomes a full-on creature feature. You've got zombies rising from the grave, alien parasites wriggling around, and Tom Atkins stepping in to prove that he's one of the coolest horror icons of the 80s. Seriously, the man spends half the movie chain smoking and dropping one-liners so good you'll find yourself yelling "thrill me" anytime something remotely spooky happens. The special effects are gross in the best way. The slimy parasites wriggling into people's mouths, the zombie prosthetics, and even a flamethrower showdown or two keep things lively. It's the kind of movie that feels like it was made purely for midnight screenings, where you cheer every kill and laugh at every line. And while it never got the recognition it deserved at the time, Night of the Creeps has since earned its cult status. Honestly, it deserves way more love. Too bad James Gunn went and made Slither years later, which is basically the same idea but nowhere near as fun. Call it homage, call it ripoff, which it is. I just call it vastly inferior. Final Exam isn't a bad movie, but when stacked against the tidal wave of slashers that flooded the early 80s, it's about as middle of the road as they come. You've got your standard setup, college kids, an isolated campus, and a mysterious killer on the loose. Only here the mystery part is tossed out the window almost immediately. The film doesn't bother with red herrings, masks, or backstory. The killer is just some random guy who shows up and starts hacking people. That's it. No build-up, no suspense, just he's here now. It strips away one of the key things that usually make slashers fun, trying to figure out who the murderer is before the final reel. On top of that, the violence is surprisingly muted, even compared to Friday the 13th, which, let's be honest, is practically family-friendly by today's standards. Final Exam feels watered down. The kills happen, but they lack that extra punch that most genre fans were lining up for in 1981. That said, the movie isn't without its quirks. One of the most memorable moments doesn't even involve the killer. It's a bizarre subplot where students stage a fake school shooting so they can get more study time. I get the finals are stressful, but faking a massacre might be overshooting it just a little. I mean, just pull the fire alarm like the rest of us. All in all, Final Exam has its place in the slasher timeline, but it's more of a curiosity than a must-watch. At least in Scooby-Doo, the monsters had motives and dramatic mask-pulling reveals. Here, it's just some guy. And that's way less fun than finding out Old Man Jenkins was behind it the whole time. Now here's one that doesn't get talked about nearly enough. Class of 1984 starts out looking like your standard teacher versus rowdy students flick, but it takes a much nastier turn than you'd expect. The setup is simple. A new music teacher comes to an inner city high school and immediately butts heads with a gang of violent punks who basically run the place. You go in thinking you're about to watch a campy, early 80s delinquent movie, but then it leans way harder into exploitation territory. The cast is stacked with some surprising faces too. Most notably, you've got a baby-faced Michael J. Fox in a small role before he became America's sweetheart on Family Ties and Back to the Future. And yes, this wholesome teen idol-to-be ends up getting stabbed. Watching it now is so surreal because it's like, wait a minute, Marty McFly just got knifed in the cafeteria. What really makes Class of 1984 stand out though is just how bleak it gets. The escalating war between the teacher and the gang goes way beyond pranks or classroom disruptions, building to one of the darkest turns in this type of movie. Without spoiling too much, what happens to the teacher's wife is brutal, and the climax shifts into full-on revenge thriller territory. By the end, you're not sure if you should be cheering or horrified by how far things go. It's one of those movies that proves exploitation cinema wasn't just about cheap shocks, it could also be deeply unsettling in ways you didn't expect. Class of 1984 leaves you rattled, and honestly, I think that's exactly what it was going for. By the late 90s and early 2000s, the slasher genre had been pretty thoroughly dissected thanks to Scream and all the imitators that followed, but Cherry Falls managed to put its own unique twist on the formula. Instead of punishing promiscuous teens with a knife to the gut, this movie flips the script on its head. The virgins are the ones getting targeted. Whew, I thought I was gonna be in trouble there. Oh wait, the virgins are the ones being targeted? Leading the charge is the late Brittany Murphy, who was always magnetic on screen, balancing that mix of vulnerability and edge. She carries the movie as the daughter of the local sheriff, played by none other than Michael Biehn, yes, Kyle Reese from The Terminator, and Hicks from Aliens. Honestly, anytime he shows up in a horror or thriller, I'm immediately more invested. The movie itself plays pretty well as a slasher. Solid kills, a fun twist on the rules, and enough dark humor to keep things interesting. But the ending? It veers into strange, unsettling territory that's a little tonally jarring compared to the rest of the film. Without spoiling too much, let's just say it's not your typical neat and tidy slasher climax. Cherry Falls doesn't always get the recognition it deserves, partly because of distribution issues that kept it from hitting theaters properly, but it stands out as one of the few slashers that dared to mess with the genre's golden rule, and for that alone, it's worth checking out. House on Sorority Row is classic early 80s slasher fare. A group of sorority girls partying in an isolated mansion, a vengeful killer on the loose, and of course all the tropes you'd expect. Pointless nudity, tense stalking sequences, and some genuinely creative kills. It's pretty standard slasher material, but what sets it apart are the little details that stick in your memory. One standout is the creepy Jack-in-the-Box that pops up early in the film, perfectly setting the tone for the suspense. And then there's the killer's final reveal, a deranged jester costume that's genuinely unsettling. It's a costume that somehow manages to be both colorful and terrifying. The movie may not reinvent the wheel, but it delivers on what fans of the genre come to see: tension, inventive kills, and that satisfying mix of horror and spectacle. House on Sorority Row is a perfect example of early slasher cinema at its most stylishly creepy, proving that even a familiar formula can still deliver chills if you add the right atmosphere and props. Unlike the original Prom Night, which can feel a bit slow and by the numbers, Hello Mary Lou Prom Night 2 goes full tilt into supernatural territory. Instead of a deranged killer, this one revolves around the ghostly possession of Vicky, a high school student, by the vengeful spirit of Mary Lou. The result is a movie that's equal parts horror, dark comedy, and what did I just watch? Mary Lou's spirit is, let's say, very provocative. She forces Vicky to do some bizarrely sexualized things, like trying to seduce a friend in the shower, and even attempting to manipulate her father in ways that make you go, It's weird, it's uncomfortable, and somehow it's also strangely entertaining. The movie leans into this unhinged energy, giving it a chaotic charm that keeps you watching even when you're shaking your head at the plot. Visually, the film delivers too. When Mary Lou fully manifests, she looks fantastic for an 80s horror movie. The prosthetics on her face though, maybe they forgot to glue it down completely? But it all works in the campy, haunted high school aesthetic. It's a movie that embraces its own absurdity, blending possession horror with teen drama in a way that's both unsettling and hilarious. For anyone looking for a back-to-school horror that's not just another killer stalking students, Hello Mary Lou Prom Night 2 is a wild, entertaining ride. Definitely a high school ghost story with a twist you won't see coming. If you're talking about back-to-school horror, Dario Argento's Suspiria is in a league of its own. Set at a prestigious German dance academy, the film follows Susie Banyan, a young American student who arrives to train at the school, only to discover that something deeply sinister is lurking behind the studio's elegant facade. What makes Suspiria stand out beyond its chilling narrative is Argento's masterful use of color. Every scene is drenched in bold reds, blues, and greens, turning the school into a nightmarish wonderland that's both beautiful and terrifying. The colors don't just create atmosphere, they heighten the tension, making every hallway, staircase, and shadow feel alive and menacing. The horror itself is surreal and relentless. Students vanish, faculty act suspiciously, and Susie slowly pieces together the terrifying truth. The academy is a front for a coven of witches. The film's violence is stylized, shocking, and paired with Goblin's unforgettable synth-heavy score, creates a sensory experience that lingers long after the credits roll. Unlike many slasher films where the school is just a backdrop, Suspiria turns the academy into a living, breathing character. Every corner holds danger, every lesson could be your last, and the atmosphere is so tense that even a simple staircase descent becomes a heart-pounding sequence. It's no wonder this is considered a pinnacle of Italian horror cinema, and why it remains my favorite Dario Argento film. I first discovered Battle Royale through a GIF on the Bloody Disgusting forums. Young Japanese schoolgirls mowing each other down with machine guns? My reaction was immediate. What the hell is that? Naturally, I had to see the full movie, and it ended up becoming one of my all-time favorite Japanese films. The premise is intense. The government selects an entire class of high school students and forces them into a brutal, government-mandated battle to the death. Each student is given weapons, a tracking collar, and strict rules. Kill or be killed. While there is a classroom at the beginning, most of the action takes place on a remote island, scattered with small houses and buildings that become arenas of fear, strategy, and terror. The open setting allows for suspenseful chases, unpredictable encounters, and tense standoffs in every corner of the island. Beyond the shocking violence, the film explores surprisingly deep themes. Friendship, love, loyalty, and the bonds that form even in extreme circumstances give the story emotional weight. Every kill carries consequences, and the movie doesn't shy away from showing how cruel and dehumanizing the situation is. The high school backdrop, normally a place of innocence, is transformed into a horrifying arena, amplifying the tension and the stakes. Battle Royale has left a massive cultural footprint. It directly inspired the Hunger Games books and films, and indirectly influenced countless video games, including the juggernaut Fortnite. Even decades later, it remains controversial for its premise. It's violent, disturbing, and emotionally impactful all at once. A combination that makes it a must-watch for anyone interested in high school horror, taken to its most extreme, satirical, and unforgettable levels. From classic slashers to supernatural hauntings and dystopian school massacres, back-to-school horror has given us some unforgettable chills over the decades. Whether it's a possessed prom queen, alien-infested faculty, or telekinetic preteens, there's something uniquely terrifying about turning the school you once knew into a nightmare. So next time the leaves start to fall and the hallways grow quiet, remember, school might be in session, but for these students, class is out forever. But what about you? What are some horror films that remind you about going back to school? Let me know down in the comments. Anyways, that's all for today. I hope you're having a great day and stay spooky.